Listen, you can't answer first on a question like this because then
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our Hill City podcast. We are excited to have you guys here with us. I am joined here by Taylor and Jake, and we have a great discussion kind of planned. But before we get into that, I do have a question that could be considered controversial, but I think it's a conversation worth kind of having, and we all could have different answers, and that is okay. But since we are leading into Easter, and this is the time where every church advertises, we have 8,000 eggs. We have 20 billion eggs being dropped from the helicopter.
oh yes.
I just thought it'd be an interesting idea to hear you guys and what your thoughts are, being that all three of us have young children, young egg-grabbing children. That do you guys have an immediate apprehension to the Easter egg hunts and the Easter egg bunny shenanigans? Not shenanigans, but activities that churches do during this season as parents?
Listen, you can't answer first on a question like this because then if you answer differently than the other person, it's like,
Do you want me to answer the first one? Do you want me to go first?
I have an answer.
I have no problem telling my answer.
okay, go.
All right. So my answer is I feel like to the degree that some people embrace it, I think can be a bit weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also to the same degree, like I'm not worried that like going to like, especially if a church is using it to be able to interact with their community and trying to use it as a way to service and do an outreach of like, hey, we want people in the community to come and gather here. And a way that we can do that is by embracing a part of what I would consider to be American culture, right? And by doing these types of activities, like we can get people more active to want to come in. Now, do I want to do a family photo like at church with the Easter bunny? Nah, dog, I'm good on that one. But like, I feel like if we're doing an activity that's
mostly
like
because the Easter bunny always looks crazy
Yeah.
and creepy. Yeah, that face is never quite right.
But yeah, I feel like it's in my mind. I'm like, okay, like if we're a church and we're outreaching towards people and we're doing an activity to get people to like come in so we can share the good news. I think about Paul being like, to the Jews, I was a Jewish person, right? To the Romans, I'm a Roman, like kind of using the ideas and the templates that people know how to understand things through and then utilizing those things to further express the gospel. I feel like if that's the conviction your church has, cool. If your church is like, it's the devil, I'm like, all right, cool, man. There's not a lot of argument that you can push back and be like, everyone needs to have 20 billion eggs hidden amongst the deal, because it all has a lot of weird, like there, if you look into it, there's a lot of weird stuff that is like rooted behind it, but
right.
That's just kind of naturally where I sit at the moment with my conviction.
We live in a culture, and in America, our culture is not the same as the culture that we read in the Bible, because they live in a different part of the world and it's Jewish or Middle Eastern or whatever. And I think the reason why you're doing something matters the most. So if you're, as a church, you're saying, hey, this is something fun we can do together that builds fellowship and community, and then I think that's fine, so long as there's not an overemphasis on the aspects of Easter that aren't glorifying to the Lord. For example, Christmas, right? There's aspects of Christmas that are not Christian, but even though I live in a culture, I'm also trying to create a culture within my own home, because ultimately it's my children who matter to me as far as like what is being taught to them. And I want to create a culture that focuses on Jesus. And so, yeah, we celebrate Christmas, but when we gather, we say, hey, this is about Jesus. We're celebrating his birthday. We know his birthday was probably on a different day.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things.
Right.
And there's nothing there's nothing wrong with doing that. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with putting a tree up,
Mhm.
right? But if you're putting up a tree or you're celebrating the bunny because you're actually interested in the pagan aspects of those
Mhm.
cultural holidays,
Mhm.
then that's problematic for sure, especially as a believer. But
And that's not a crazy thing to say, because I think what a lot of people don't realize is there is witchcraft and the occult happening, like, probably in your neighborhood. Like, when I was pastoring, I was shocked at the amount of people that their salvation story was, I was in a cult. We would sacrifice animals.
Mhm.
We would
right,
be
like during
cursing
Halloween and stuff like that.
but during many holidays.
Yeah.
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 And I was like, oh, and like asking them, where'd you come from? They're like, oh no, it's like, it's still where I live over here in McKinney. Like,
Right.
this happens secretly a
Yeah.
lot. And so I think
Mhm.
it's not, sometimes I think Christians get a bad rap for thinking like, oh, the devil's behind every corner. But there really is witchcraft happening
Mhm.
in our backyards. Like, these people would tell me their testimonies and their stories of how they would have seances and invite the rest of their witch coven
Yeah,
over to like curse their neighbors and curse this. Every church within a certain proximity, they would be sending curses on the pastors and curses
Right.
on, and be praying that, they would get into a car crash, or that they would, and these are real things that happen
Yeah.
around major holidays. So
Yeah.
it's, on the flip side of that, kids like candy. so
Adults like candy.
adults like candy.
There's been a
and-
theory going around.
And my mother puts $2 in the eggs. And so,
Holy smokes, wait,
my
how many
kids are
eggs are out
searching for
there?
those dollars. So, not in every egg. There's like
No,
certain special eggs. that
we
get
all
the
know where we're
dollars.
bringing our children now.
Yeah. So, no, I think there is a difference between, say, setting certain family traditions that are just fun. I mean, families have game nights. Those are fun. You're
Mhm.
not sitting there focused on the Bible. You're playing Trouble, or you're playing Sorry, or, but it's fun and bonding. And so there are things.
You guys don't put scripture on all the game board pieces?
Well, when we play Scrabble, we only use Bible words.
Yeah. Only
But no, I think fun is great, especially when you have little kids. It's like to see their eyes light up,
Yeah.
and that fun is fun and it's great.
Mm.
But like Jake said, if you're doing it for the wrong reason, God is all about the motives of your heart.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
Yeah, so long as you're not embracing mixture
mhm.
in what you're doing, right? Because there are certain things that we do need to be set apart from, right? We need to separate ourselves from the pagan
Yes.
parts of our culture. But
Yeah, because a lot of people think Ouija boards are fun. And let's have a. I'm serious. So I wasn't making a blanket statement about like, oh, if you think it's fun, it's fine. I'm
Right.
No, you weren't saying that.
Yeah. I
No,
just
it was
wanted
just
to
sort
make
of
sure that
fortifying.
Nope, we got it.
I was just
Fun
trying to fortify
first.
what you were saying.
Yes.
Fun first, everything else. No.
So yeah. My mom used to tell me that her friends would do Ouija boards for fun,
Right.
and she was never raised in a Christian household. Like,
Yeah.
never had a Bible. They never went, like, that was not a thing. God was not a
Mm.
thing. And she said she just always felt in her heart. She didn't even know the word for like spirit or
Yeah.
a conscience, or she just said, I always felt like I wasn't supposed to be doing that.
Mm.
But so
Yeah.
I think that's just another example of how no matter who you are, God can call you and speak to you
Right.
and
Discernment.
set you apart
Right.
from the culture of the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Discernment is so important,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Because you can talk to one person and they say, hey, our conviction is no tree in the house.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
you talk to another Christian and they say their conviction is a tree's fine.
Yeah.
Is one person right or wrong? Well, you can't really point to
Right.
any one thing in
Yes.
particular
Right.
that says, hey, having a tree in your home on Christmas is wrong.
Right.
You can't find anything that says that in the Bible. And so
Right.
it's just like, okay, you, in this regard, you have to follow what you feel like the Lord is saying is
Right.
permissible.
Right. And the
Um,
revelation. Mm.
Now
Yeah.
that discernment has to end up lining up with the word,
Yes.
right? Because it's not like,
Because you can't walk around in fear of every.
That is the thing, right? It's
yeah.
a balance, right?
also people walking around saying, hey, the Lord told me this. And it's like, oh, what?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that.
But I think that's also a great reason to be in community,
Yeah.
right? Like it's-
Accountability.
like I think that like the idea
collective
of people
discernment.
neglecting like the gathering of the saints, and like then they just start going off and just doing whatever they think is right in their own eyes because they don't
Yeah.
even have another person to be in community with to say,
It's
hey,
dangerous.
this is where I'm at. This is where I'm thinking. I feel weird about taking my kid to this Easter egg hunt. Can you
Mhm.
pray with me on this? And can you
Mhm.
seek the Lord and counsel with me on this? Am I just doing this because I'm being weird? Or am I doing this because the Lord
Yeah.
is trying to set my children apart
Yeah.
for a different thing, right? There's different people who are like, oh, my kids don't watch any TV at all
Yeah.
because the Lord has told me this. You know, Samson, his
Mm-hmm.
parents were like, we're not cutting his hair because of something that the Lord has talked to them specifically about their children. And I think what's good about those things is like, you need to stand in your own conviction. And I think that is beautiful. And I think that's great. But I think that that doesn't necessarily make it how everyone has to operate by. That doesn't become the new standard of, well,
Yeah.
I didn't cut my son's hair, so
Right.
no one around me needs to cut their son's hair.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Because this is
Yeah.
what the Lord has promised for me. And it's like, well, that is what the Lord told you. And
Right.
let's be in community and let's really understand what we're doing and how what you're doing affects everyone else, but also like how what we're doing
Yeah.
affects you as well.
Sometimes God told people, don't marry anyone from outside your culture, your race, your religion.
Yeah.
And sometimes he said, marry a prostitute.
Hey,
You
go
know?
get
So
it.
you have to, not sometimes, one time. But I do think
that is noted.
yes, God speaks to us differently because we all have different plans, and he only gets to set the plan. Only
Yeah.
him.
And some things are negotiable and some things are not.
It always bugs me out whenever I read scripture, like, and the Lord changes mine. I'm like, I don't even, what is that even?
Yeah.
How do we even start that idea? But I think that's a good deal. So
I
this
could
is
go there.
I know. That's a very,
I like that topic.
I love that topic. Yeah. And how he seems to also, if you could call it, negotiate with humans.
with humans
Or other Elohim. Yeah. Very cool.
beings. But yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was fun as we all have children
Yeah.
and they all are desiring for the candy
Yes.
that is out there. My son is now, he used to not be into candy, but this
Mhm.
kid is really about.
It is a good topic for discussion because it's like, okay, you could technically just do this without the sort of veneer of Easter.
Right.
And you would say, oh, that's fine.
Right.
Let's hide eggs in, I don't know, square boxes
Right.
and hide them. I'm sorry, not eggs. Let's hide candy in square boxes
Yeah,
and
yeah,
place
yeah.
it
Yeah.
everywhere. And instead of talking about bunnies, we talk
Yeah.
about just spring and flowers
Well,
and whatnot.
That's how
And
we
then it's
talk
like,
to
is it okay now?
Right.
Yeah.
right.
That's
At what
how we
point-
talk about even Halloween. Like for us,
Right.
I've always taught the boys, and I genuinely believe this. I'm not like, I'm not trying to make a worldly cultural thing fit into a Christian. Like I genuinely love the changing of seasons,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I love that, and I celebrate that God teaches us things
Yeah.
through physical seasons.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth celebrating.
Yeah.
And so that's what I tell the boy, when it's Halloween time and all that, I'm like, yes, let's celebrate
Right,
the
right.
fact that like the seasons are changing and
Yeah,
God
yeah.
is going to do new things in the season. And I do the
Mm.
same with spring. I'm like, let's celebrate all the little baby birdies being born
Right,
and
right.
all the like seasons. Like we just celebrate beauty in the earth too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what we make it more about
Mm.
and less about like the obvious like pagan things that
Right.
it is. Yeah.
For Halloween, we kind of just we just taught them from early on, like, hey, Halloween is bad. It's like it's about death and like
Same.
all that stuff, and so we just don't do it.
Yeah. We don't do Halloween, but we do candy and celebrate.
I
We
mean,
make a
yeah.
celebration of. You can't not do candy because kids go to unless maybe if your kids are homeschooled, but if kids go to
You
school,
can get away with it. Yeah.
if kids go to school, they come home with some candy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And is
you
the
know.
candy evil because it was
No,
given out
see-
Yeah.
on Halloween
Nah, it's
versus
no.
the day before?
No, because we're celebrating fall. That's what it is. We ain't
Yeah.
celebrating demons. We
Created
celebrating
by the
fall.
Lord. Fall created by the Lord.
Exactly, not the fall, but fall.
Yeah. I feel like growing up, we definitely did like trick or treating And then we did also like the like trunk or treats and like the fall festivals
Mhm.
Yeah.
and things of that nature. And I think our approach is just like it's a great time to interact with the community and like to really be a part. And like I think I see my neighbors the most during like events like at Easter, egg
Yeah.
hunt gathering, and I see them the most during like Halloween where everyone's
Yeah,
out.
because everyone's out.
Yeah, everyone's just out, and it's a great time to be able to interact with people. So we have done that. I've taken my child out, but we have our conviction has led us to be like, hey, like this is going to be okay for us, and to like take our kid out and to experience that. And
Mhm.
we're he's dressed as like Mario or like whatever
That's a good one.
dinosaur.
Mario.
Yeah, he loves. Oh my gosh, he was a very adorable Mario this past year. But it's just kind of been one of those things where I think that where we want to land on is like not being afraid, but also knowing how to be like how to take
How to be
something and
wise.
use countercultural to like
Yeah.
to pivot something. So if someone's like, hey, this is about this, it's like, all right, we're not going to be afraid of this thing and that thing. Cause I feel like I grew up of like Ouija boards like freaked me out. And these
Mhm.
things like put fear into my heart, and songs about like
Mhm.
Halloween like really like made me nervous that like even being in a room with that was like something evil was
Yeah.
like gonna come upon me that I wouldn't be able to like overcome.
Mhm.
But I feel like the thing I want to like kind of bestow and the conviction that we have with our children is that like you can walk in the midst of these things, and if Christ is at the center of what you're doing and you're walking on the path that he has for you, like those things aren't going to overcome you. Those things aren't going to be able to, the thing that is inside of you is greater than any of the things that can be out and about and kind of doing that whole deal. So that's kind of where we are. So we are the paganists. I
The
guess.
We never did
Trick-or-treaters.
the costumes
Yeah.
on Halloween or going out trick or treating.
yeah.
But I mean, it brings up the argument of like kids like to dress up.
Oh,
And
all throughout the year.
My kids
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
costumes
yeah.
in the house that they put on
Oh, yeah.
sometimes. And so it's like, oh, any other day it's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Except for just this one day.
right.
Because that's when everyone else does it.
right.
For a different reason. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah,
It's just
yeah, yeah.
like, okay, how do we
I just try to be like super real with my boys.
Yeah.
About everything.
Yeah.
Just
And
honest.
yeah. So I just tell them like, hey, I tell them about the testimonies I've heard from the real witches. And I
Mhm.
tell them like, hey, everybody that's out tonight in the neighborhood, those are our friends. Like we love them. We can go hang out with them. It's not
Friends,
bad to be
neighbors.
out walking on Halloween.
Right.
We go walking on other nights.
Right.
But do know that when you're out and about walking, there are people putting curses out there on the neighborhood and on the like. So you do have to be a little bit more spiritually aware, which of course they don't know how to be at 5 years old or 8 years old. But
Mm.
that's my job as a parent
Right,
to
Right.
tell them about these things and to, I just don't.
It's well put.
I tell them about it so that as they get older, they don't have that. They don't think, oh, mom's going to be mad at me because I'm out on Halloween. Like,
Right.
no, I've already told you what happens on Halloween, and I told you what happened. If now you have to make that choice with the Lord
Mm.
as you get older and have your own convictions
Right.
and your own discernment. So that's kind of right now we're the discerners
Yeah.
and we make those decisions. But as they get older, they need to be informed so they can make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Well stated.
I'm with it.
Well, thank you.
So let's see. No, yes.
But I like this though because each of us kind of clearly do things a little bit different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Concerning whether Halloween's a great example because
Yeah.
it's
Right.
sort of more of a dramatic
It's more, yeah.
example
Yeah.
than say like Christmas or Easter. You can't control the culture that you're born into.
Right.
Right.
We're all born somewhere,
Yeah.
and there's gonna be a culture that's there that you didn't get to choose.
Yeah.
And so, while I think it's important to take hard stances when it's appropriate, taking a hard stance against aspects of your culture is
Right.
important, but not every aspect of
Yeah,
your
right.
culture.
Yeah.
Because you live in it
Right.
and you're a person. And it's like, we may not be happy about the economic state of America right
Right.
now. Is there anything we can do
But we
about it?
live in it. Yeah.
No, you just live in it.
Right.
Like you pay the extra $5 million for gas and groceries and you move on
Eggs.
with your life.
Yeah.
and thank the Lord for what you do have.
Right.
Yeah, I've had it. That's a good point. I've had conversations with I have a friend who she was her and her husband both were born in India and then moved here, and there's a lot of spiritual demonic activity that they've had to encounter and break off, like generational things.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so she, although she's very kind and doesn't judge anybody for their holiday traditions, but she's like, for us, we have to be extra careful about that stuff
Right.
because our family, not them personally, but their family
Right.
still practices
Mhm.
certain rituals from those other religions and
Right.
things that they grew up in. And she's like,
Gotcha.
it's very important for our bloodline that we break these things for our daughters
Mhm.
and that they
Mhm.
don't see us even dabbling in that because that's so prevalent in people close to us in our family.
Yeah.
So people are raised in different cultures and different religion. And it's like you said, it's everybody. There is a right and a wrong when it comes to what is God's will.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I do think there is different levels of how serious do we need to be about this based on, it's like somebody who's trying to be sober, they don't need to be drinking alcohol. But
Right.
someone that's never had a problem with alcohol, I can
You're
have
fine.
a drink every
Right.
night. So everybody has different levels of convictions and we
Right.
all need to respect that.
Yeah.
But as long as the collective body is holding each other accountable to
Yeah.
what is biblically
Right.
accurate.
Yeah. No. Well, yeah. I think all of us are using that same deal. Like, don't be drunken, right?
Yeah.
Only be
Mhm.
drunk in the spirit. Like, those are the things we want to overindulge in, is like the things of Christ. And as long as we're kind of doing that and keeping that first, I think that everything else will kind of spin
Mhm.
out the way that it's supposed to do. You know what I mean?
Like the Jewish holidays, we are grafted into that.
Mhm.
But do we celebrate them all?
No.
No. Is that okay? I think that's fine.
I want
Because
Yeah.
as we're on this side of the cross, the culture is, well, it was always about Jesus coming. But now that Jesus has come, our culture is focused very much so on that. So when it comes to Passover, we're not necessarily, I mean, you can celebrate the passing over in Egypt and the deliverance, but Passover is really actually about Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because he's the Passover lamb.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just using that as an example of like, not only do we celebrate Passover, but we celebrate it differently now
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because of what has happened.
Right.
And culturally who we are. There's, do you guys celebrate Purim?
No.
No.
But
Why
even,
would we? It's
Right.
not our culture.
Right.
Yeah.
But even the way that we interact with those things, right? Just to go back to what you're talking about of Passover, like the way, even if we're acknowledging Passover, like I wouldn't say no one. None of us, I feel fairly confident to say, are getting a whole lamb and roasting it. And you know what I mean? And trying to consume, you know what I mean? We're not doing those same, like even when we're acknowledging these things, we do it in a different way than what was traditionally done then, because we're doing it in remembrance and honoring that thing rather than trying to like adhere to the exact regiment of how those things are to be carried out.
I roast a whole lamb on Passover.
Do you really?
I do, but not because I have to. I just love lamb.
And you
I
consume
was
it all?
about to
Wait,
say
wait,
it's
wait.
so good.
It's so good.
The hardest
so
part,
good.
do you consume the whole thing?
No, of course not. The leftovers go in the fridge. What, you can't save it to the next day? You didn't have a
You
fridge.
have to invite the neighbors over. It all has to.
Which
Oh
and
my
we do it
Right.
with community members
Yes.
and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
fellowship.
yeah.
But yeah, if there's leftovers, they sit in the fridge. We eat it
Right,
tomorrow.
Yes, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
about.
Yes.
I just thought it was funny
Yeah.
because I was like, no, I do roast a
the
lamb.
whole lamb.
But your
Right.
point still stands.
Right.
We're not doing it because we have to.
Right.
We're doing it because one, lamb is delicious.
Yes.
And it's representative
Right.
of Christ.
Right.
Right. That's why we do communion. The whole point of communion is, hey, remember why you gather.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus. That's the reason you gather.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah.
Good
that's
stuff.
funny though.
You would be roasting a whole lamb.
Yeah.
I love lamb.
It's delicious.
So one of the things I kind of want to talk about while we're talking about things that are representing Christ, and when we're talking about idea of like the Passover, is also kind of thinking about, as we're entering Holy Week and as we're thinking about things, of kind of thinking about the resurrection and kind of thinking about like, why is the resurrection part of what Christ did like so important? Like what makes that aspect of like that he came and that he lived and that he healed and that he died and that he was beaten and broken for our iniquities? Like, but what about the resurrection makes like why is that an important aspect? And we can't like what even if we didn't have the resurrection aspect inside of it, everything changes. But like why does that
Yeah.
make a pivotal point in the story of Christ?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't we have to have resurrection in order for forgiveness of sins, or no? Like if he wasn't resurrected, would we still be able to repent and have our sins forgiven?
As in grace versus law.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, which that kind of segues into like a very broad, well, not broad, but like the complexity of God's design,
Mhm.
Right.
right? Because there's an element to this, which is that God designed things to go in a certain way, and then he hit the start button for time,
Right.
and then things have progressed as according to his will. I kind of think of it as like a marble run, right? You create a marble run, you know what I'm talking about?
With the like actual marbles?
Yeah, marbles.
Yeah.
Well, it's got all the tubes and
Yes,
like the
yes.
things and the clacky
Yes.
whateverness. And so you set it as it should go, and then you put the marble in, and it's going to go through the marble run
Mhm.
as you designed. And so it's like there's an element to this question, which is why resurrection, why Jesus, why this certain way? Well, part of the answer is just simply it's what God chose.
Mhm.
Right.
This is how he designed things to play
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's not entirely a satisfying answer,
Yeah.
right? One of the things I think of is the blood.
Mhm.
The Bible treats blood in a very unique way.
Right.
One is in Genesis, right? He breathes into us. But it Genesis actually defines that the life of a person is in their blood.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get like overly technical. You know, we breathe oxygen, da da da.
Mhm.
I don't want to like go down that road, but it is very interesting that that's what the Bible defines in Genesis.
Right.
And then the law comes in and we use the blood of animals,
Yeah.
right? And it literally, you know, it says the blood
Yeah.
of the animal
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what is sanctifying.
Yeah.
And then we have Jesus,
Right.
right? And his blood
Right.
and how it's described and its importance is heavily emphasized
Mhm.
Yeah.
throughout
Mhm.
scripture. So there's something to this death that Jesus took on, and then the resurrection of Jesus that we may not ever fully understand,
Mhm.
but it was critical to his plan
Right.
for how to reverse what Adam and Eve did.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, I don't claim
I know
to
that
know.
was kind of like
No.
getting a little
No.
deep cut maybe from the start, but
No, I was just gonna say, of course, I don't claim to be a philosopher of all religions, but I have taken several world religion classes, and it's a topic I'm interested in. And to my knowledge, Christianity is the only religion that claims a eternally resurrected being, because
Mhm.
there have been other claims of resurrections,
Right.
even on earth today. There
Right.
are people that
Yeah.
get raised from the dead as
Yeah.
miracles or whatever, and even Lazarus. You know,
Mhm.
it's not the resurrection in and of itself that was the miracle.
Mhm.
I think it was the fact that the other resurrections throughout history, ones that have been documented at
Mhm.
least, that person still died
Mhm.
after, you know.
Mhm.
But
Jesus
Jesus
is
is the
eternally,
only
yeah.
one in that any religion ever has claimed to rise and never taste death again.
Yeah.
it is
So
unique.
Yeah.
I think that's unique and something of significance.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. I think circling into the thing, what you were saying before about the sin aspect of that deal, right? Because we're talking about looking at it as the picture that were painted before, where we have the sacrifices of bulls and goats and lambs
Yeah.
and birds. And so we have those different things that are atoning and kind of covering and blotting, right? Because they're representing the idea of blotting the sin, the transgressions that the Lord has, and that burnt offering is a sweet aroma, reminding the Lord of something that will happen, which is
Yeah.
crazy to
Mm.
think about. It's like, this reminds me of the thing that will happen because he's outside
Yeah.
of time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that type of thing. So whenever I think about the atonement of sin, and we hear about, think about the crushing and the brutality that Christ kind of endured, and the progression of the crucifixion, right, that he endured, and the death that he also took on, and going down into Sheol, right? That idea seems to be taking on the idea of the transgressions of sin aspect, right? And it almost feels like the resurrection
Mhm.
is what enables us not to just be forgiven of the transgressions, but to now bring us into the throne room, and to kind of be able to push us into the place, and to be now, because his blood is covering us, to be seen as being ones who are now being elevated higher than angels, even though
Mhm.
we were initially created lower than that, and being the ones who will be sitting and judging angels and that particular deal. It seems like that resurrection is key tandem to that grace aspect. So I always think about the mercy aspect of being the crushing, and the grace of being bestowed upon things that we didn't earn, and that coming through the resurrection of Christ.
Yeah, we're kind of dancing around one of the primary topics of Hebrews, actually, right? Because for whatever reason, the Lord chose that the method, right? And you
Right.
mentioned the bowls and the blood, and
Yeah.
the tabernacle, but we haven't mentioned the high priest
Yeah.
position, right? And it was the high priest's job to go into
Yeah.
the most holy place,
Right.
and offer a sacrifice or make an offering for the sins of all the people, just in general, and
Yeah.
himself, once a year.
Right.
And how this ties into resurrection is that there would always need to be a new high priest. Why? Because they're men and they die.
Yeah.
But now we have a high priest who is alive
Right.
Mhm.
eternally,
Right. Right.
and the Bible says that he mediates for us.
Right.
He's a mediator
Yeah.
between the Father and us.
Right.
Why do we need that mediation? I feel like that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
Right,
We
right.
could answer some of it.
Right.
Some of it is also just has to do with the nature of
Mhm.
God, and
Right.
that
Right.
we are made in his image, but there are aspects of God that are not like us.
Yeah.
We are actually quite different in many ways from God. Sometimes we focus on the similarities, sometimes the differences. And so it's if he had only just died, then he wouldn't have been a different high priest.
Right.
And subsequently, there wouldn't have really been a different priesthood,
Right.
and a different rule set.
Right.
Right. Because the priesthood changed. Hebrews talks about how that, and that the law related to that priesthood also changes.
Right.
And so now
Yeah.
our high priest is alive after the order of Melchizedek.
Right.
And we have grace now.
Yeah.
And so our experience of how we get our sins forgiven and how repentance works, slightly different than before the cross.
Right.
And so it's that resurrection was so critical. I don't claim to understand why, but critical in that high priest is alive forever, always saying, "Hey, Father, look at my works, Jesus. My works now are in place of theirs."
Yeah.
Right. And so he sees us through that lens, which is really, really great. I can't even fathom
Yeah.
any other life than, we're just so thankful.
Yes.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? I felt like maybe I was saying that a little circuitously, but
No, I'm with you.
I think the resurrection, kind of our whole belief system hinges on it.
Yeah.
Because if there is no,
Mhm.
if that is not true,
Mm,
then how can you believe anything else in the Bible?
mm,
Because to me, it's like it was all leading up to something.
Yeah.
And if that's not true, then a lot of the prophecies that talked about that
Yeah.
must also not be true.
Yeah.
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Actually.
We'll go for it.
Because that was
So,
one
yeah.
of the things I thought of, which was in Hosea chapter 6. It says, "Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us, that he may heal us, for he has struck us down, and he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will raise us up that we may live before him.
Right.
And then also Psalm 16, where it says, here it is. Therefore, my heart is glad and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol or let your Holy One see corruption. Both of these are passages that point to Jesus and are tied to Jesus.
Yeah.
And you mentioned prophecy, right? That's God saying that something's going to be a certain way. And once he says it,
Yes.
it has to be true.
Yeah.
Because the Bible actually says in Hebrews, it's impossible for God to lie. Right. It's literally a limitation that he has.
Right.
Now, it's the best kind of limit, right? I mean, almost the word limitation is almost like not even the right word to say, but it makes sense. Like he's not like us. If he makes an oath, he can't break that oath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You and I can make a promise and break it tomorrow.
Right.
Sure.
No,
and so there's so much about what God has said concerning Jesus. And this gets back to like, was just part of the design.
Yeah.
Right. That it had to happen. But yeah, prophecies that the Lord makes have to come true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I see. And then like, it's cool because he declares himself to be the resurrection. You know, Christ says, I am the resurrection, the thing that they were looking for
good.
At the end of their days, when everything would be said and done and rolled away, that they would be brought back again at that resurrection time. They all truly believed in that, especially in his time. That like we understood it, and we all reference these things now as a rapture, and we think of it more as like, you know, the spirit side of it. But they were also in that time in the Jewish culture, they were thinking about these things like, my physical body is going to be breathed in again by the Elohim, and it will come back to life. So make sure you keep track of where my body is, and make sure we preserve it in a way that's going to be good, because I'm going to need this thing again. Like, don't lose track of me. Don't leave me in the wilderness. That's why there was thought to be like a curse to be like out in the wilderness and to die there, because if you're dead there and then you get raised back to life again and you're there and no one else is around you, that sucks. Like you're really out of luck. Like, I'm not going to make it back to be in community with everyone else. Right. So the idea of just like Christ being the resurrection, and like we talk about all the time, like you can't give something that you don't have, right? So Christ, like himself, like being like, oh, no. Because I am the resurrection, like death doesn't have a permanent hold on me. Like there is a separation, but like, I think also about the resurrection more so than like dead to life, but also as in like in a closeness to God. Like there is a nearness to God that like the resurrection kind of insinuates, of like when they were thinking about God, Elohim breathing life into them again, like there's a nearness and a closeness to God that there would be in that season that was going to be different and new than what it was beforehand. And so when I think about the resurrection of why it's so important that not only that Christ came back and was resurrected, but that showed us the importance that God had for us of like, I want to be nearness. I want that nearness with you. And that this resurrection power is now going to be open and available, right? Because Christ is now at the right hand, and he's now the high priest that now sits in that place. And that kind of brings us now in a closer, it tore the veil, right? And it brings us in that closer communion that we can now be in with God than what we had before.
And we don't think about it often in terms of, okay, I'll say it this way. A lot of this discussion and a lot of God's plan centers around these ideas of death and then resurrection, or, you know, death and rebirth and that sort of thing. But we don't often consider how there's really no such thing, at least for us, as non-existence.
Right.
Right. And so because you could consider that, like, if you reject God and you're not part of his plan, then your punishment isn't non-existence. Your punishment is eternal death or separation from him. Right. So it's resurrection kind of Well, I mean, it's
Kind of like your second salvation.
yeah. I mean, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
I struggle even to make it to the end of that thought.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Like, oh, here's some interesting things that I just thought that I'm thinking of.
Uh-huh.
Where does it end and why?
Yeah.
Right.
That's how all of my thoughts are too.
But it's because there's only so much of this that I can understand.
Right.
Like,
Right.
because these are just the terms that he created us in.
Right.
And so
I was going to mention that in the sense of, for people that may question, why should I believe in the resurrection? And I think because we made the point, or, it's very easy to say, well, that's an impossibility. So therefore, your whole belief system does break down and the Bible is not true.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do believe that.
Mhm.
But I think, I don't know, this may be a bad answer because it may not be helpful if you already don't believe. But I think, number one, you have to look at how do we view any historic documentation, regardless if it's Christian or not.
Right.
Is we can only learn history from eyewitnesses
Yeah.
who wrote stuff down. I can't go back in time. So there's literally only documents we can look at from people that wrote those things that saw this happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can choose whether or not to believe those people.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the fact that I believe Abraham Lincoln existed,
Right.
I wasn't
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
but there's documentation
Yeah.
from eyewitnesses
Yeah.
that shows he was alive and
Yeah.
went to a theater and things happened.
Right.
But so for me, I don't find it hard to believe historical documentation, especially when there's many eyewitnesses, but that's up to each person to
Mhm.
believe in their heart. And I think too, there are differences in details of the story.
Yeah.
But I worked at a courthouse for a couple years and attended many trials.
Yeah.
And to me, the reason that makes it a little more believable is that there are slight differences because eyewitnesses see things differently.
Yeah.
And there was never a trial I sat in where everyone said the same exact thing
course.
about the incident.
Yeah.
And to me, if Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all said the exact same thing,
Suspicious.
then you could just say, oh, well, it's not true because they just copied each other.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
right.
so either way,
but they don't contradict each other.
they don't contradict. There's just details that are
There's
different.
different.
Yeah, which is real interesting.
Their experience
Yes.
of Christ is different, and it shows a different aspect.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I just wanted to put that out there that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
when it comes to miraculous things like a virgin birth
Yeah,
or a resurrection,
Yeah.
that where there is documentation,
Mhm.
it still all comes down to faith.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to have the faith
Yeah.
to believe? And then when you do have that faith, or you think maybe you even have a little faith of a mustard seed, you go,
Right.
I might believe this.
Right.
Then relationship comes into
Yeah.
it. And then it starts to be like, oh no, I don't believe this because it's just a document.
Right.
I believe this because I know him and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he is part of my life.
Yeah.
And so that it morphs into, I believe this for other reasons. But I just wanted to put that out there that it's important. Faith is such an important part of any
Yeah.
belief system, whether you're a Christian or an atheist. You still have to have faith to believe in what you believe in.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I always think it's so interesting just how valuable human recollection is.
Yes.
And it's just like, it is one of those things where like, as soon as someone describes an event back to you, it immediately changes your memory of how that event went.
mhm.
And it's just like, this is why like they're always sit in pairs. There's this idea of like, okay, at least there's two of you. You guys can at least come to some sort of agreement about what you're seeing that's happening, or Christ is revealing himself to so many different people, right? And we're getting this whole deal where it's like, you know, I've revealed myself and I'm going up and these people are just watching me like go into heaven. It's just like, yo, like, these could have been private events. Like this could have been like, I'm here to like get with my disciples and really like equip them for the next chapter and to really like ingrain in them the things they're going to need to know for the next steps. But he's just like, I got a lot of things to do before I skedat. Like I got, but yeah,
There's something about resurrection and specifically Christ's resurrection
Yeah.
that reverses the death that came in.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about a couple different things, and if any of it's confusing or maybe hard to land on a final answer with, the thing that we can all definitely walk away with is like what he did works.
Yeah.
And it continues to work.
Yeah.
And it continues to change you think about who you are before Jesus and who you are now, or just even like the difference between someone who is a Christian and walking with the Lord and someone who isn't. Like there's a very stark contrast between the kind of people that you are and the fruit that your life bears. And it's all because of that resurrection and death process.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I feel like it's like that like when someone just didn't just like do enough to get by, right? Lambs and bulls and goats. It was just enough to get by.
Yeah,
but like
just enough.
This is an over deal. Enough to where it's like, oh, you get change back. Like,
yeah.
I endured everything, and there's still so much more left over of like, you don't have to worry about it, because if there was still something left to do, then I wouldn't be here, right? There's almost another reassurance of being like, hey, like, Peter, you rejected me, but like, I'm confirming with you as many times as you rejected me. I'm giving you the opportunity to continue to confirm with me that you love me, right? There's that idea of constantly like, I don't want you to just get by. I'm not wanting you just to think like, oh, we're just gonna skate through this thing, but I want you to walk in the confidence of knowing that like there's more in store. But yeah, I love that.
That's good.
We love having these conversations with you guys, and we love having these conversations with each other. We just want to kind of let everyone know to leave a comment down below or send us an email at info@hillcity.com. And we would love to stay in connection with you guys. If you guys have any questions about resurrection, or if you guys just have any questions in general that you'd love to get at us with, we would love to stand with you and help you with that. And with that, we just remind everyone to be a city on a hill and never hide. We love you guys. Peace.